The BERNINA Binder Attachment number 88 is one of my favorite tools. I'm Lori Broseski from Thread Play with Bernina in Denver, Colorado. Let me show you how to custom fit your binder to your Bernina sewing machine. Then I'll help you figure out what width strips to cut for your binder, how to insert those fabric strips into the binder, when to use straight grain fabric, and when bias cut might be better. I'll show you how to make simple flat finish strips, as well as binding the edge of a project like a quilt. Let's get started. The first thing we'll do before adjusting our binder to our Bernina sewing machine is to put the number 95 foot on the machine. The number 95 foot is designed specifically for use with the Bernina binding attachment. Now, a lot of people think that this foot really is just a number 1 foot, but look closer. The left toe of this 95 foot is actually wider than the right toe. The right toe is narrower to allow the binder to get closer to the side of the foot so that everything is closer to the needle. Now, I am using a 95C foot today with this lens on top because my machine is capable of a 9mm wide maximum stitch width. If you own a machine with a 5.5mm maximum stitch width, your foot won't have this lens up here, and it will have just a bit of a cutout along this right toe that again allows that binder to snug up closer to the edge of the foot. Now I have my number 95 foot on the machine, and I have my binder ready to attach to the bed of the machine. Take a look at these two screw holes in the bed of the machine. These are designed so that we can attach accessories to our sewing machine. I'm going to slide the binder in place so that this opening is over those two screw holes. I'll push it up close to the right-hand side of my presser foot, and I'm going to use this black thumb screw that came with the binder to attach it to the machine using that far left screw hole. So what happens when we screw this down the way it comes adjusted from the factory is that the binder has a tendency to pull to the right. This hump here is a fabric guide. Look at the distance between the fabric guide and the right edge of the presser foot back here. I have a space between this fabric guide here and the right side of my presser foot too. What happens when the binding strips go through the binder is that the right edge of the binding tends to bulge out in these openings here, and that creates these kind of funky diagonal fold lines in our binding strip, and it can prevent the raw edge of the binding from being stitched down on the inside of the binding. Another problem that I run into if I push this all the way back is that when I go to lift up my presser foot using my knee lift lever, the toe is stuck inside the curl of the binder back here. Now if I lower my presser foot, use the hinged portion to pull the binder back, raise the presser foot, and then push my binder back in, now when I try to lower my presser foot, it's caught on the front and my presser foot doesn't go all the way down to make good contact with the fabric and the feed dogs. So we're going to custom fit the binder to our sewing machines. I'll begin custom fitting my binder to my machine by removing it from the bed. I'm just going to unscrew this black thumb screw and set it to the side. And I'll grab a screwdriver here, and I'm going to loosen all 4 of these screws. So the 2 along the back and the 2 on the left-hand side. I pre-loosened these screws for the video. You'll have to put a little bit more muscle into loosening those, but they aren't tightened down too awfully tight. Okay. Now, this back portion of the binder will slide right to left. I'm going to adjust it so that I have just about the same amount of open space on the right-hand side of this screw as what I've got on the left-hand side. It doesn't need to be exact because we can fine-tune everything once we get the gross adjustments made. Now that I have those two tightened down, I need to work on this portion. Notice that this will slide forward and backwards. I'm going to pull it all the way towards me so that I've got lots of open space. Let me get the screwdriver here to point this out. So that I've got lots of open space back here, no open space up here towards the front. And then see how this piece will swing right to left? I'm going to push that fabric guide all the way to the right so that there's no open space between the fabric guide and this portion of my binder, and tighten this down. I'm going to have to take this off camera so that I've got better access. Now my screws are nice and tight. I'm going to grab my black thumb screw, reattach the binder to the machine, and I have this left fabric guide, the right-hand fabric guide pushed all the way up to the right-hand side of the toe of my presser foot. Let me make sure that that's nice and tight on there. Now notice that this portion of my fabric guide is way too far to the right of my presser foot. I can accommodate for that by loosening this thumb screw and sliding that piece all the way to the left so that it's up against the right-hand side of my toe, and I can tighten that back down. And now my presser foot raises and lowers, and I have no gaps between my fabric guides and the side of my presser foot. Let's get sewing. I have some cut strips of fabric here that are seamed together, ready to put in my binder. How did I know what size to cut my strips? If you look in the lower left-hand corner of your binder, you'll see that it's engraved with the width to cut your strips. In this case, I'm using the 38 millimeter binder. It's engraved with 38 millimeters, and I know that my fabric strip needs to be 38 millimeters wide. Now, if you're like most Americans, we don't speak metric very well. So how do we know exactly how wide 38 millimeters is? You can run that through Google search. Simply type in 38 millimeters to inches, and it'll come up and tell you that it's a scant 1.5 inch. And then, do we want to use straight grain fabrics or bias cut strips in our binder? We can use either one. The straight grain strips don't have much give in them, and I like to use the straight grain when I'm making fabric strips to sew together to make into a larger piece of fabric. Then I like to use bias. I have a piece right here, and there's a lot more give in this strip. So this is going to be very nice for making custom trims to go around curves. Inserting your fabric into the binder is a simple step of pushing it into this open edge here. I like to start with an angled cut whenever I can, even though I'm working with straight grain fabric today. I'm going to swing my binder out this direction a little bit and push that cut edge into the open portion of the binder. I'll use my thumb to keep pushing it through, and grab my stiletto here to grab the pointy end and pull it through the rest of the way. Now, sometimes when you're working with blunt edges, this edge will come through pretty wrinkled, so I simply pull it right on through the binder, help those folds form, and then pull it back this direction. Now I'm going to push my binder up towards the presser foot. I'm using my knee lift lever to raise my presser foot and push the folded binding underneath the foot here. I want to be sure that I've got enough binding underneath the foot that the feed dogs can grab it and begin pulling it through the machine. I'll begin stitching. All I'm doing is making a finished strip here. Now, when we're working with the 38 millimeter binder on a 9 millimeter machine, we typically don't even have to adjust our needle position when we're just running flat strips through. Now, I intentionally put a seam in these strips to show that you can run seams through the binder. I do like to be sure that my seam is angled so that the folds aren't trying to stack on top of each other. And then I just watch to be sure that this cut edge isn't going to fold back as it goes into the opening of the binder. And then I just slow my stitching down a little bit to allow everything to fold nicely. And here comes that seam. There we go. It's stitched right on down. Making flat fabric strips with the binder is super simple, but I'll bet you don't want to stop there. What about binding quilts? I have a simple little quilt block here with batting in the middle, and I've got my backing. Let's see how simple it is to bind the edge of this little quilt block. I'm going to place the cut edges. I'll zoom in here so you can see a little better. I'm going to place the cut edges in between the folds of my binding and let the machine and the binding pull my fabric block, quilted block, right on through. I'm keeping my fabric pushed up against these fabric guides so that the binding can wrap around and be stitched down. Now, when we get to the end, it is possible to stop and swing our binder out so that we can miter this corner. There are lots of good videos on mitering, so we're not going to cover that in today's video. So here is my bound quilt block finished on both the front and the back. No hand sewing required. So now your binder is custom fit to your Bernina sewing machine. You know how to cut your fabric strips, how to insert them into the binder, and how to bind a project. I'll bet you're ready to make a project. I've got other videos on using the binder attachment. I'll link to those below. If you live in the Denver area and you'd like to buy a binder, please contact Thread Play with Bernina. If you live outside of the Denver area, I'm sure your local Bernina dealer would be happy to help you. See you soon.